Sunshine, dude, buckaroos. How the heck are you? I will be Tom the Whiskey Whisperer for the purposes of this video. Bear with me while I try to get something fixed here. There we go. There it is. And we're back in business. Anyways, I digress. So what I did here is a classic Manhattan and then kind of just a little riff on it. No, not too far, but just a little bit. So the classic Manhattan, both drinks use the same whiskey. The Ben Holiday Missouri Straight Bourbon Whiskey is Sir Rick House Small Batch Reserve. I picked this up back in August. I still got a little bit left there, even after making these two nice cocktails. This one comes in at 117.9. It is really good stuff, man. Distilled in the fall of 2016, bottled in March of 2023, aged 6 years in new charred oak barrel. So there you go. That's the story. The stuff is really good, man. It is perfect, neat, but I'm going to make a couple cocktails with it. Again, the classic Manhattan. So, about 2.5 ounces of the whiskey, about 3/4 ounce sweet vermouth. Bitters. Well, I did take a little bit of liberty with the bitters and use cherry bitters instead of the traditional Angostura. Ah, ah. That's good, man. I do like me a Manhattan. I do. It's my favorite cocktail. Although I will admit, I kind of feel it more as we get into the fall or winter months. The old fashioned has been trendy for a few years now. It took me a while to get into it because, well, every time I had one, it was just too damn sweet. A lot of folks are using the wrong whiskey, and they're just using too much sugar or too much simple syrup, whichever they choose to do. And when I say the wrong whiskey, I mean the wrong whiskey. I mean, yeah. A lot of folks want to use a wheated bourbon. In a sweet cocktail, you really need to use either a rye or traditional bourbon that uses rye as secondary. When they use, oh my goodness, it swapped on me. I'm not sure what just happened here. I don't know about biscuit. I'm not sure why I did that. Well, biscuits. Anyway, I don't know why my background just changed for no reason because I set it back to the beginning and somehow it fucking changed. So I always on a live video when things fuck up for no apparent reason. Anyway, yes, I digress. Let's have the whiskey and calm down. Man, that's just fucking frustrating. Anyway, I don't even know how that other background got because I have it on a particular playlist, and that video that showed up isn't on that playlist. So I have no idea how that showed up in there. Anyways, we're going live. I'm just gonna keep going. Anyway, back to Zen. The traditional Manhattan. Yeah, the Manhattan is my favorite cocktail. But I was talking about the old fashioned for a little bit because it took me a long time to get into the old fashioned because I just wasn't liking what I had out until I started really making them at home, and then I can kind of get to where I like the cocktail. And the problem was, yeah, the sugar level. A lot of folks just make them too sweet, and again, the wrong liquor, the wrong whiskey. Some folks want to use a trendy wheated bourbon. If you're using a wheated bourbon, which is a little sweeter than traditional anyway, it's softer, it's sweeter, and then you're adding sugar upon that. We've got a cocktail that is just so insanely sweet, it's just almost undrinkable. Well, for me anyway. Now, a Manhattan is traditionally used with rye as well for that same reason, because you're adding that sweet vermouth in there. If you're using a wheated bourbon, the cocktail is going to be too sweet. However, well, here's the however. If I'm using a traditional bourbon that uses rye as a secondary, yeah, so a bourbon is acceptable. But yeah, if you're making an old fashioned, man, you really got to use a traditional bourbon or a rye, or your cocktail is just going to be too sweet. Unless you just like a sickeningly sweet cocktail, and hey, man, that's on you. Do what you got to do. But quite frankly, that's why I had such issue with that cocktail for so long. Is that every time I had one out, or even at a friend's house, it was just too sweet. They want to use a trendy wheated bourbon. I'm not going to mention any names, but I think most of you know what I'm talking about. Or they want to use too much sugar or too much simple syrup. And then here's the other part of that for me is I'm not a fan of the sugar cube. No matter how much you muddle that sugar cube, you're still going to get a little bit of graininess, and I just don't like that. I don't like the grainy, but I've talked to folks about 20 years younger than me, and that's why they like the sugar cube. For whatever reason, they like that graininess. For me, it's just unpleasant. It's texturally unpleasant. But for, I guess, those of a certain age seem to like that for whatever reason. They like to eat sand. I've got nothing to say about that. Kids like to eat sand. Hey, man, who am I to judge? But that's what it feels like. It's like eating sand when you get those grains of sugar in there. I don't like that graininess. Bringing it back to the classic Manhattan. Well, I think that's why I enjoy the Manhattan the most, because it is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. Again, traditionally with rye, but bourbon, a lot of even early recipes call for a bourbon. But again, You've got to use you've got to use a bourbon that uses rye as a secondary grain and not a wheated bourbon. Otherwise, your cocktail's going to be too sweet. But not only that is the body. It won't have the body you need that cocktail to have. And again, that goes back to my issue with the old fashioned. If you're using a wheated bourbon, that cocktail isn't going to have the body you need it to have to stand up to all that sugar, unless you just like a sickeningly sweet cocktail. And I think a lot of folks about 20 years my juniors seem to like that sickeningly sweet cocktail. Whereas for an old guy, it's all about the balance. The classics are classics for a reason. A classic old fashioned did not use wheated bourbon, it used a rye the same way a Manhattan does. Wheated bourbons are just too sweet in either cocktails. There are other purposes for wheated bourbons. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm not hating on wheated bourbons. I just don't think they belong in an old fashioned or a Manhattan. Because there's some out there I enjoy. I mean, who doesn't like Pappy? I mean, it's overpriced and it's hard to find, but it is good. Folks want to drive up prices with trends, and now we've got $25 bourbons going for 120. Anyway, that's an argument. I'm not going to get on that soapbox again. The classic Manhattan. So, should you always use? Here's the thing. You don't necessarily have to go to the top shelf, right? But your cocktail, especially when you have a liquor forward or whiskey forward cocktail like this, you don't necessarily have to go to the top shelf. But your cocktail is only going to be as good as the ingredients you put in it. So if you use bottom shelf liquor, you're going to have a bottom shelf cocktail. Like I said, you need to go all the way to the top. No, you don't need to use 21-year-old Pappy in a cocktail like this. You don't, but you don't want to use Old Crow either. You don't want to use Ten High. You don't want to use Kessler. Get a good one. Here's the thing: when they talk about cooking with wine, they always say never put wine in your food that you wouldn't drink. And that is my same advice for cocktails. Never make a cocktail with a whiskey that you wouldn't drink neat. And that is just up to individual taste, right? Some people will drink specific things. And now, if that works for you, that's fine. But for me, that's the rule of thumb. The same thing about wine is never put wine in your food that you wouldn't drink. Never make a cocktail out of a whiskey that you wouldn't drink neat. It's that same rule of thumb. Damn, that is nice. And you gotta have that dark cherry, man. If you don't want to buy Luxardo, if you don't want to buy the Marasca, because they are rather expensive, those are the traditionals. However, there are less expensive alternatives on the market that aren't that bright red, terrible cherry. There really are. I mean, Collins has several varieties out there that are every bit as good. What I've got in here is a brand called Peninsula that if I put a Luxardo or a Marasca next to this, you couldn't tell the difference. It's absolutely just as good, and it was $10 for the jar. So no, you don't necessarily have to buy those two brands, the Marasca or the Luxardo, but you do need a dark cherry. And again, use one for your taste. It goes back to your cocktail is only as good as the ingredients you put in it. The Marasca, the Luxardo, those are top shelf, but in many cases, you're talking $25 to $30 a jar when the Collins goes for 10 to 15, depending on your neck of the woods. And I'm telling you, they're just as good. This Peninsula brand I found on sale, it was $10. And like I said, if I lined all three up, you couldn't tell which one was the bargain cherry. Ah, man, that is good. That's good, man. I don't care who you are. That's tasty, man. Oh, biscuits and gravy. For the longest time, I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning on Monday morning, so I wouldn't do a video on a Sunday. But now I don't have to, so I can do a Sunday video. I won't do it too late. But yeah, I can do a video on Sunday and relax now. I don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning. Yeah. For most of my professional life, I've had to get up early in the morning. I worked for various retail giants over the years, and I always had to get up early. And so I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. Reinventing myself in my old age. It took me it took me almost 59 years to find my calling, but here I am. Nonetheless, here I am. I'm glad to finally be working for folks that appreciate what I do and what I bring to the table. And it's nice to not to work for a corporate anything. I gotta tell you, because corporate will always screw you, no matter what corporate organization you work for. There is no loyalty. You may think you have some friends in that organization, but they will always answer to the corporate giant in their own best interest. They will never stoop to doing the right thing because it is counterproductive to their means. Nobody is ever your friend when you work for a corporate giant. They will stab you in the back every time. If it behooves them. If it's in their best interest, they may say they're your best friend, but if it's in their best interest, they will screw you over every time. So I enjoy not working for any corporate entity at this particular moment in time and enjoy doing what I'm doing for the first time in a very long time. Having people around me that I work for and work around and work with you know, that respect you and everything you do, that is very nice as well. So cocktail number two. So it's basically I use the Manhattan as a template, right? But here's where I took some liberties. I took out the sweet vermouth altogether, and then I added the Cafe Amaro, which is Amaro is an herbal liqueur. The Cafe Amaro is from Jay Rieger's, by the way. Is adds coffee to the mix, so you have an herbal coffee liqueur. And then the bitters. Well, I took a since I was doing coffee. Oh wow, those are good. The other liberty I took was the bitters. Since I was doing coffee, I used Angostura cocoa bitters. My wife found those for me, so I thought I'd try those. Again, try to change the game a little bit. So I've got the whiskey with those. Wow, herbal notes. So you might get hints of anise in there and other things. Again, but it adds coffee, so you've got those coffee notes, and I've added the cocoa notes with the bitters. Man, that's nice. Let me set that down for a second. So the Cafe Amaro. Let me read a little bit about that to you. Cafe Amaro is a one-of-a-kind take on coffee liqueur that marries the herbal and slightly bitter characteristics of Amaro with a single origin cold brew coffee. And that's why this stuff is just so gorgeous. It's just done so impeccably well. It is at 62 proof. Let me show you that label. I'm going to show you the back if you want to freeze frame that and read that for yourself. It is just a nice product. And then I've integrated those cocoa bitters to kind of try something a little bit different here. Ah, biscuits. Ah, that's nice, man. So herbal and bitter, it says. Well, yeah, that's the thing here. When you're doing a Manhattan, you're adding the sweet vermouth because it does add a little bit of sweetness, but it also adds a little acidity, a little bit of bitterness. So if you're taking that out, you've got to replace it with something that does the same thing. And that's why, in this case, the Amaro works because although the flavors and aromas are quite different, it does the same thing by balancing it out with again that acidity and that bitterness. Oh man, that was good. Boy, Eddie, I've done a version of this cocktail before, but I've never done it with the cocoa bitters, and that really is a game changer here. As that little bit of chocolate note, it really just changes the nose altogether. Because now I feel that bourbon, I feel that the Amaro, the coffee, the cold brew coffee in there. And again, and then those cocoa bitter notes. Huh, that's interesting. Ah, biscuits, man. Biscuits, baby. Biscuits, man. That's good. I don't care who you are. That's delicious. Anyways, that was good. Ah. Anyway, 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 not for nothing, but oh, that's good, man. Mm. As always, anybody watching, you're always free to post any comments, questions. I will answer almost anything, unless you're just being an asshat, and then I'm just going to ignore you. I'm not going to give you a platform if your intention is just to be a jackass. But other than that, hell, man. And in some cases, some folks like to get on camera with me. If you want to have a cocktail with me, let me know, and I'll send you the link, typically via Messenger. Although we are getting near the end of this particular video, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Oh, biscuits. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, even the Morrow is not meant to be sweet, but it does add a little bit of sweetness, and you've got the herbal qualities of the Amaro balanced with those coffee notes of the Cafe Amaro. It is nice. It's very nice. And then of course I've added those cocoa bitters to kind of change the game a little bit, see what it would do. And boy, that is delicious. A little bit of cocoa with those coffee notes. Huh. That's good, man. I don't care who you are. That's just tasty. Anyway, I digress. I better wrap this up. I am Tom the Whiskey Whisperer, Whiskey Evangelist, prolific whiskey drinker. Purveyor of wisdom. All right, good guys.